Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome into another edition of Infection Podcast. My name is Nick Craig. You can follow me on X at Nicholas M. Craig or check out our website, infectionpodcast.com. Joining me, as always, a little grungy today, Brian. Brian Aldridge. What's going on here? Very dark and ominous.
Well, here we go. I've got a little light that shines on my face, but then it makes.
Well, that's not even that. You're wearing a gray shirt. You got a black chair, and you got a black background here. It's very devious.
I know. Well, I might swap out the black background when you're not looking. Just
okay. Well, this shot will be on in perpetuity. What's going on?
Yeah. Not much. Hey, if you want to find me, of course, at Boise Computer on X, or if you want to get me at Brian Aldridge on GamerGate or True Social, all the other places. So we had a story here. Do you want to jump into anything particular first, or
no? Go for it. Yeah, lead it on.
We had a story that was kind of unfolding last week, because of some of the news we didn't cover it, but there's been a lot of controversy going back and forth. Part of it started with a Matt Walsh video that he put out that was talking, and now this is a video that has multiple different things he talks about, but one of the first things he talked about was radical wokeness of the video game industry, which, surprise, that's what we've been talking about for, it feels like, years now, kind of building up to now. We talk about it a lot, but he spent 20-ish minutes talking about a specific company, and this is one of those companies that we've been talking about, or the industry's been doing this, but this is the companies. I remember, was it Sarkeesian or whatever? Yeah, there was a lady who did something very similar. Under a different company. Yeah. GamerGate
1.
All this.
Here we go. GamerGate 2 is here, Brian.
So this is GamerGate 2 that we're pushing into now. Yeah. But this is something that he showed a lot of good points. There's a lot of people weren't really aware of these sort of things. But I don't know if there's anything you want to show first, but there was a video played by one of their previous employees. Yeah. That caught me off guard with just how racist what they're saying was.
Should we take a listen?
Yeah, let's take a listen, because it knocked me back a little bit hearing it.
Let's take a listen.
Lalanders. She reportedly used to work at Sweet Baby Inc. just a year ago, and now she works for a studio at EA, one of the biggest game studios on the planet. And watch as she explains.
By the way, EA sucks still. I'll say that. Sorry. Go ahead. Roll tape.
Why she doesn't hire white people on her team, because apparently they commit all kinds of microaggressions. Watch.
I have a team of 21 right now for Validate. It's a pretty big team. It's a crazy big team for indie games. But who is your team? Validate has a team of mostly all people of color. We have no white people on our team. I did that because I wanted to create a safe environment. And I know the best way for an environment to be safe is to be around people who are just like me. And I'm not saying that white people in the industry are creating unsafe environments. I'm not saying that. That is not what I'm saying. I am saying that sometimes it is hard to work with white people because they think that something made it okay, but it was really a microaggression. And no one wants to deal with that while they're trying to make a game that they love.
Now,
so before he continues, if we were to flip the script, Brian, which is something I like to do on my radio show all the time, if you said I have an all-white game studio because I don't want to work with folks that have a different skin color, you would be tarred and feathered and ran out of the industry.
Yeah.
Pretty handedly.
Yeah, and she pretty much said that she's illegally doing hires. Because if you're purposely not hiring people because of their skin color, you're breaking the law in the United States.
The anti-discrimination law. Yeah.
But it happens all the time now, and people seem to be okay with it because, they're just white people. Who cares? Well, I brought this up a long time ago. They said the same thing about the Jews in Nazi Germany. Who cares? They make me feel uncomfortable. They don't understand me. I don't want them around. They're not like me. She pretty much gave the exact excuse that people back in more racist times would have said of why they didn't want to hire a black person, because they wouldn't understand our customers. Let's say if they're serving mostly white people, I don't feel comfortable working with people that aren't like me. Well, Wasn't that kind of what the white people were saying back in the day?
Absolutely.
They didn't hire black people because, they wanted to work with people that were more like them. And so when people get a taste of racism being gone, it's amazing how quickly they run to it again.
It was racist and bigoted then. It's racist and bigoted now. It's just that to quote the great Michael Scott, how the turntables have turned, Brian. I mean,
yes.
Really. I mean, it's just a complete. There's been this thing, and unfortunately, conservatives for the longest time, right? They're like we don't need our safe spaces, we don't need all this other stuff, but then they fall into those same traps. But I mean, this is. Some people are like, oh, this is reverse racism. No. It's not reverse racism. It is racism. I mean, just plain out and simple. When you are saying that you don't hire people based on their skin color, because her words, I don't want to work with them. That is the textbook definition of, as you noted, not only anti-discriminatory hiring practices, but legitimate actual racism, like unadulterated racism.
If I said we don't hire black people here because I don't want to work with them, don't you think people would be like, "Oh my goodness, what did he just say?"
Yeah, they'd say this guy's a racist.
Blinking an eye. Yeah,
this guy's a bigot, and you would be right in being called that, because that would be an accurate description of how you were acting.
And the problem is, she surrounded herself with racists to where she thinks that's normal speak. Right? She thinks that's totally okay to say, because I'm sure the people in Germany didn't mind saying all these things, because who was going to look at them odd? They're like, oh, all these people believe what I believe. She's made a team of people who believe and are just as racist as herself, or are afraid to say anything because they don't want to get fired. And now EA is just hiring people that are blatant racists. And one thing that's come out of this is there's been a Steam group that was created that has curated all of the games that are affected by the Sweet Baby Inc. So what they do is they go through, make the list, and they put not recommended. Well, I don't know. They all say not recommended. I assume that the curator put not recommended. Maybe that's their. I think that's part of this list system. They put 18 of that they don't recommend on this list, and they're all ones. Just for an idea. We've got Assassin's Creed Valhalla. You've got Gotham Knights. I'm just reading some that I recognize pretty quickly. Suicide Squad. There's some smaller titles in here too. Flintlock is a pretty new one that I've heard some horror stories of. But, these are games that they've gone in and given their opinions in telling these companies what they need to do to make them more DEI friendly.
So if you go back a couple of episodes, it's probably 2 or 3 weeks ago when I first brought this onto the show, we talked about it, and I made the point then, and I'll make the point now. I don't inherently think there is an issue with hiring a consulting firm to look at a game and say, are there things in it that different groups, based on their gender, based on their religion, based on their racial makeup, their culture, that there is nothing wrong with that. Because when you are making a game for a worldwide audience, which some of these games are, some are not, but when you're making a game for a worldwide audience, those might be things that you are not an expert in, or your organization does not have an expertise in. Unfortunately, Brian, this has turned into more than that, where this company, Sweet Baby Inc., is going into these game studios and, from all accounts, going in there and saying all white people are bad and you need to drastically change your game to fit this model of diversity, equity, and inclusion that we have drawn up, that we have said. Now, I will note one quick thing. That lady who was in that interview no longer works for SBI.
Yeah,
so
she now works for
a studio inside of EA. Not, and I'm not saying that as a catch-all or as some sort of admonishment of them as a company, but I do think it's important to know. Unlike many other people on the internet, Brian, we generally believe in providing information. She does no longer work for that company, so you can't take those comments and say, well, she's a representative for the company. It's not true. Yeah. But obviously you can tell this didn't just show up yesterday. This was obviously
and I've watched interviews from the founder
of
Sweet Baby Inc., and these are the similar type of things that she's repeating. That one girl was a little bit more blatant with the racism. And I just wanted to give a quick definition, because we keep hearing DEI and people assume that DEI is bad. If they were truly following DEI, but let's look at what DEI means: diversity, the state of being different from one another. Does it sound like that's what she was trying to accomplish?
No.
She said, everybody here is a person of color. I don't want any white people, pretty much is what she said here. Okay, well, that's not diversity. You're making sure everybody's just like you. That's not diversity. So that out of DEI is out the window. Then we got equity, the quality of being fair and impartial. Does it sound like she was being fair and impartial in her estimation of white people?
I would not say so.
She was definitely not. And then inclusion, the action or state of including or being included within a group or structure. Was she including white people in her group? No. So the opposite of DEI is exactly what this person promoting DEI is doing. The problem is they've taken DEI, just like if you look at Antifa and what Antifa claims to be, anti-fascists, then they're the fascists. You've then got DEI people who end up being the racists who claim, but see, I'm not racist. I only like people that look like me. Well, okay, wait, what?
So this is what I find so rich about this. And I've said this in conservative circles before, Brian, and I get a lot of pushback, but I want to say it to you and get your thoughts. DEI, based on the definitions that you just read
from the dictionary, yes.
From the dictionary, are what everybody should strive for.
Yeah, perfect.
In my personal opinion.
Ideal.
But just like everything else, what happens, Brian? The left takes control of it and they go too far. They ratchet it up just a couple notches too much. And then all hell breaks loose when they do that. The premise of DEI, based on its definition, is great. However, this is not DEI. They might claim it's DEI. They might masquerade it as DEI. It's not. It is absolute discrimination and absolute racism that they are impending upon.
Yeah, and the issue we have is the opposite side of the DEI group, just they don't get enraged. I always wondered, that's something I always wondered, back in the day, it's like when all these things were happening to the Jews in Nazi Germany, like, why didn't somebody stand up and why didn't people stand up and try to fight it? Well, why aren't people standing up for the most part and fighting it now?
Well,
people
they are
actively being discriminated against, but not in the companies, not in government, not in all these places where it really matters. You have people on the internet that are saying things, and because of Twitter, you're actually able to point some of these things out. Pre-Twitter takeover, before it was X, could this story really even get out on any social media platform? Would people have been allowed to talk about it? Not at all.
So,
and that's the problem where now we've got a small group of people that are talking about it, but I figured more people would be mad about racism.
Brian, I love you. And I say that because I do. But I also love making your blood boil. So I would like to contend to you, my good friend, today, this headline over at The Verge. The return of GamerGate is smaller and sadder. A group of gamers has mobilized a harassment campaign against
they're professional writers. How are you to judge them on how to write?
Harassment campaign against a story consulting company, marginalized developers, and a journalist in the protest of what they see as, quote, forced diversity in gaming. What do you make of that headline and sub headline there from The Verge, Brian? What do you make of this from them?
I mean, it's them getting mad that someone's pointing out their racism, right? The Verge is also a racist company that promotes a lot of racist things. Now, these are individual writers, but the culture they've created it encourages and pushes racism. And the sad part is these articles get pushed and pushed and pushed into different people's feeds, and a majority of people, that article and all the things that they say in it don't even catch them off guard anymore. It's like doesn't even make them say, "Wait, what?" Because we're so conditioned to these terms, and we're so conditioned that black people are still being held down in the video game industry. Really, that's an all person of color team, which I've learned doesn't mean that you're all black. It just means you're not white, is what a person's of color group is. You've got a whole group that say we're not going to hire a single white person, and they're still there.
Correct.
They're still working for that company.
Yes. EA of
no
all
one
places.
bats an eye. Yeah, nobody bats an eye. That's what shocks me, is that we've gotten to a point, and it's just like when Juden is written on the side of the person's store, all those people walk by and said, "Oh, well, look at that. That's a Jew person's a Jew who owns that store." Rather than saying that's horrible what they did to that person, right? Isn't that the natural reaction you should have? That's horrible that they're doing these things, that they're being racist towards white people, that they're refusing to hire white people because of the color of their skin, right? Which just as easily we've accepted the fact that certain people don't get hired because of religion, the color of their skin, all these things that are supposed to be protected. You're only protected if you have certain things in your name or in your bio, right? That's the only time you're protected, and that's scary. It's just we've hit a point where how do we recover from this? We've got a generation of kids that have been raised to be racist by their schools. Not all of them are going to be that way because some of them have influence from home, but we've got a lot of homes that don't have good influence. And look at the kind of kids we're generating out of schools nowadays. It's a disaster when you go see a lot of them. They're a mess. The mental health issues that if you go look, I saw a graph here a couple days ago, and it had mental health issues, like reported at the age of 18, and they had, different lines, in their 30s and their 40s, and they had whether or not they were conservative, moderate, or liberal. And they showed that the people that were conservative, like their mental health issues was down, really low. And the people that consider themselves really liberal, like their mental health issues are through the roof. As far as they said to a therapist that they're struggling with mental mental issues, or a therapist has told them they have mental issues. It's the thinking that they create and they make in your head is crazy, is creating crazy people. I mean, yes. Honestly, this is creating a generation of psychotics, and we don't sit there and say, well, does this help? I mean, Hitler created a whole generation of psychotics using the Hitler Youth, people that were willing to harm other people and not think twice. There's a reason that they would have those kids sit there and beat up on each other and try to knock each other out, because they wanted to desensitize them to violence. What do we have happening now with Antifa and all these kids? We're desensitizing them, saying, I'm allowed to be violent towards you because you hurt my feelings.
Correct. Same
thing. We're in it. We're right back to where people say, we would never let Hitler and Germany and like that type of mentality come back. Well, boom, you did. We're in the middle of it, and you're not even saying a word. You said, I would never, but you do, and you are. Like, if you truly cared, you would say so. We say something. I mean, this is a part of trying to make sure that the world's a better place for, our kids when they're adults, is by fixing and trying to help people see, what, that's unsafe and that's scary racist thinking that's going to someday possibly cause you and your wife to be killed. You say, well, that's crazy. That's what happened in Germany. Same type of thinking, same type of actions. It's a different technology time, but they went and picked a certain set of people that they didn't view as good, and they were dangerous. And so then they could do whatever they want to those people. That's you saw what she said. I will not hire white people. They don't make me feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And she was okay.
It's a pretty shocking situation the fact that somebody could say that in such a casual way. And yeah, and of course she goes, I'm not saying that, I don't want to work with this. Or I'm not saying I'm going to do this. Or I'm not saying I'm going to do that. By the way, nice background change. I'm not saying this, or I'm not saying that. Like she has to then try and clean it up. Here's the problem. And it was very well noted in the comments, or in her comments. This is what the left does. They surround themselves with groups of individuals that can only think and act like they do. It's the same issue with Hollywood. It's the same issue with mainstream media. They are so secluded into this small little shell of people that think, act, and speak and live life like they do, that they have I don't think they have a grasp on reality, Brian. And the reason I say
they created their own reality.
Well, they did. Well, but it's not reality. I mean, that's what I'm saying, is it's essentially an alternate universe that they've created. They don't have a grasp on reality. And the way that you can prove that is by comments like this. When they say, and she in fact says, yeah, we don't hire people based. Again, let's get rid of the fact that it's white. We don't hire people based on their skin color because they might be a microaggression. They make us feel unsafe. We don't want to work with them.
Yeah.
I mean, you are living in an alternate reality or an alternate world if you genuinely believe that. No, I don't know anybody that actually thinks like that. Anybody.
Yeah, in my life. I mean,
no. I couldn't name a single person that I have ever interacted with that believes that. Yet, here's the progressive left saying, this is what we support. Yep. This is what we're in favor of. This is the future that we want. I don't know how far this goes. As you can see, it's funny because if you go through this Verge article, they talk about how the original GamerGate was just against women, and it was harassing of women in the industry. No, the original GamerGate was a game developer who was a female, was sleeping with journalists to get good reviews. Yeah, which, if I'm being honest, I mean, whatever. But if that's what you bring to the equation, if that's what you bring to the table, that's fine. But then when they
could just start an OnlyFans and say that her only,
you
gotta remember, create a whole twist with it.
This was like a decade ago,
legal.
Though. This was like a decade ago when the original one happened, and then of course it got changed into, this is an attack on females in the game space. It had nothing to do with females. It had to do with a female that used her position to influence journalism in the video game industry. Which, the thing that's so interesting about GamerGate 1 versus GamerGate 2, which is what we're in the precipice of right now, is the video game industry is a shell of what it was in 2014. Yeah. Half of these websites are gone. Half of the sites that exist don't actually have anybody writing for them. It's all AI-generated content. And the sites that do have so-called journalists working for them, Brian, it's like two or three people. I mean, it's a guy that's writing your content. So this industry has changed so dramatically since then. I wonder how far this is really going to go in regards to this.
Very quickly, I saw a PC Gamer article where they were kind of doing something a little bit different. Let me read you this title. Sure. A company called Sweet Baby Inc. has become the target of anti-woke gamers because it offers consultancy work, an industry standard service that's been normal for years. It's not the consultancy work that we're concerned about. It's the racism from the consultancy work.
Yes.
They're like, but we've had consultants for years. Why do they not like consultants? No, it's what they're saying. It's the fact that they're saying you shouldn't hire white people, or you should do things like let's say we're doing a video game that's World War I era. I heard someone kind of commenting on this earlier, and you're putting women or let's say a black woman on the front lines. Well, that's highly unlikely that, I mean, if you can't find a single case of where it happened, then why are you pushing for that to be the thing when it's, unless you're creating an alternate universe? Sure, create alternate universes, but all these games, they're not playing off of alternate universes. How is anybody going to know real history when you've changed it so much? At what point will these kids have no idea what reality really was 100 years ago?
And to me, it's not even the issue of that, more as you take established characters and you take established storylines, and then in the name of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, you start destroying those storylines, destroying those characters, and breaking the lore. Brian, let me be perfectly clear with you right now. When I play a video game, I don't particularly care and look at that stuff. It's not an issue for me. However, it is an issue when you take an established story, an established brand, and then try and manipulate it to fit whatever sort of ridiculous, stupid quota that you have manufactured. And that's what this is. These are all manufactured quotas. Nobody is forcing this. The government isn't forcing it. No industry standard is forcing it. These are made up standards that they have done themselves. This is not an industry-wide approved thing. This is something that they themselves have decided to do.
Well, and this is one, for instance, we'll have a link in our show notes for a tweet or post or whatever they're called now from Grums. And he's somebody, we've talked about him quite a while ago, but he's a video game developer that's been kind of pushing back against all of this. And he makes a comment about and has a quote from somebody who used to work for this A44 Games. He says, "I used to work there. Flintlock was a good project with a lot of potential. Then it was ruined," because this is one of the ones that came and consulted. And, and right away, what the first thing that they said is, you need to make the lead character was originally a white person in this. So they said, you need to make that person a person of color. And then the changes went from there, and they talk about it a little bit in here. And the protagonist not being a white person doesn't bother me so much, but that's just the tip of the iceberg of where it starts. And then they start doing all these things that changes in the story, changes in the love interests, and it's no longer the same story. And a lot of times it'll ruin what was originally created, is what we end up finding. And so it's like you let a consultant come in, tell you what to change with no pushback because you're worried about being labeled a racist, and they'll come in to destroy your product, and then they'll demand a high fee for doing it. Yeah. And a lot of what's causing this is right now, we talked about it the last 2 weeks about funding in the video game industry. The cost of money right now is high. The cheapest money you can get are DEI type of loans, where you can get money because to hire consultants and to do pretty much what you see here, you'll get money for doing that. And so because they're struggling so much with money, they're more likely to allow these people to come in, because then they'll get grants and things from the government for doing it. So like they're getting paid to make their game worse, but it allows their company to stay afloat, right? Just because of how bad the economy is right now. So you're seeing a lot of these companies will be willing to do this at the moment, but at what cost? You're temporarily saving your company, but sacrificing what could have been a good game that, if it was done well, possibly could have saved your company as well. So
yeah, definitely.
It's very frustrating to watch and see these things happen.
It's incredibly frustrating. It will, in all likelihood, lead to the complete and total demise and just like the original Gamergate, it will lead to some big time issues within the industry. And unfortunately, Brian, it just doesn't seem like anybody really cares.
Yep. Yeah, you hear there's pockets of people. They tried to cancel Asmongold because of it, and this Grums guy has been dealing with a lot of pushback in the industry. I think he used to work for Blizzard and World of Warcraft, and saw a lot of these things starting to happen. So there are a few voices out there, but you see the old picture of all the people sitting there doing Nazi salutes, and then the one person who's defiant. Like, I want to be that defiant person, and I want to be remembered as being that person who didn't give in just because it was easier, or who wanted to fit in because you're worried about people looking at you and seeing you as different. If it's right, and I feel like this is right, you should be hired by the qualifications, not by your race, your religion, your sexual identity, all the things that you're supposed to be protected under, that they've thrown out, and claimed that they're protecting. We gave the definition of DEI of what it's supposed to be. They are not following that. At what point will people wake up and? How many times have I given the analogy of the emperor has no clothes? This is one of those situations. You can call it whatever you want, but the emperor still has no clothes. This guy's still naked, right? At what point are you going to be willing to stand up and say, I see what you're saying, and not be scared to seem different? Because enough people are willing to not be scared by all of these people sitting there. I mean, what are you worried? They're going to call you a racist? I mean, there's video proof that they're racists. Nowhere have I said that I didn't like somebody because of the color of their skin. Never have I said that, right? Never have I said I don't like somebody because of whatever qualifications. I've got people that are all kinds of different races. I've got friends that are all kinds of different. I've got friends. Not all my friends are straight. Shocker. I've got, not everybody is just like me, and I still consider them my friends, right? Here, you get people are saying, you've got a whole culture of people that are avoiding and not willing to be friends with white people, and it's normal to them.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
There will be a lot on this over the next couple of months, and we will be keeping a very close attention to it and kind of running alongside as we running alongside as a lot more of this comes out and the fallout continues. So there's a lot of links in our show notes, which you can find over at infectionpodcast.com to take a look into that. Brian, some big tech news this week. Apple, boy, oh boy, the Department of Justice has officially sued Apple over what they're calling an iPhone monopoly in a landmark antitrust case. So this is a whole new thing. This is of no relation to Apple versus Epic. This has got nothing to do with what's going on in the EU. This is a brand new case that the DOJ brought forward last week. And the lawsuit claims that Apple's anti-competitive practices extend beyond the iPhone and Apple Watch business, citing Apple's advertising, browser, FaceTime, and iMessage offerings as other portions of this. There's a couple of interesting things that I took away from this lawsuit, and the big one is this. The Justice Department said in its official filing that to keep customers buying iPhones, Apple moved to block cross-platform messaging apps, limit third-party wallet and smartwatch compatibility, and distributed non-App Store programs and cloud streaming services. The biggest one right here is cross-party messaging apps. That's specifically
really fighting them right now.
Yeah, it's specifically dealing with a piece of software called Beeper, which I don't know if you read or are familiar with, Brian. It was a very popular Matrix chat application that was developed and essentially created an iOS bridge so that you could use this application on your Windows computer or Android phone to iMessage. I was
and take advantage of some of the iMessage features, right?
Yes.
So that it's more like iMessage.
And, it was iMessage, yeah. So, like on a Windows computer, I was a paying subscriber of Beeper. Then Apple kicked them off the store and shut down their whole system, essentially. I'm pissed about it because I had really gotten comfortable with being able to send files and stuff back and forth via iMessage from my computer. Very convenient. Now I'm back to uploading files to my my private Discord server, and then saving them to my phone and sending them. It's a royal pain in the ass. So it seems like, Brian, Apple may have stepped in it here Now, it's important to note this is not Lena Khan and the FTC. This is somebody worse, Merrick Garland in the Justice Department. But there was a lot of comments about, and you will definitely have more insight in this than me. But Microsoft in the 90s with Internet Explorer, the DOJ sued Microsoft.
Installed it on every computer.
Yeah,
made it difficult. You couldn't easily not make it one of your main browsers. It's just they really started trying to lock you into it, and it's something they eventually even abandoned themselves. This whole topic, this is something my wife and I talk about because she uses iPhone, I use an Android.
Yeah, she's
and
great.
We talk about, yeah, she is. And some of these are some things that we talk about where she sends or somebody sends her a video or she sends a video or a picture and it lowers the quality of the image or the video. I mean, it just makes it to where it's all fuzzy and doesn't look right. And we talk back and forth about it being because, for some reason Apple will change it as it reaches, and they refuse to adopt RCS. And that's what really kind of pushed this to the limit. I think they could have probably continued to get away with it, but when they did such a hard pushback to not adopt industry standards for cell phone text chat, I think that's what really bit them, because they were like, well, our service is better. Well, you could still maintain all the features of your current messenger and integrate RCS into it so that it has the ability to talk to any other device and maintain all your features. I think they wanted to keep, that's the reason why you would have two people with an iPhone, a husband and wife, because then they could take advantage of all those little features together. They didn't want to open up that wall and let other people have it, because it'd be less of a reason to go to and buy an iPhone the next time. Because they're really, Androids are getting feature-wise pretty close to what an iPhone is now. There's not really a huge amount of reasons when it comes to camera, when it comes to features.
So
Android 14, 15 is pretty close.
I want to highlight this. Prosecutors highlighted one exchange between Tim Cook, or Tim Apple, as some people refer to him as, and a customer. Not to make it personal, but I can't send my mom certain videos, the complaint says. One user told Cook, referring to a 2022 interview at a Vox Media event. Tim Apple responded saying, buy your mom an iPhone.
Yep.
That was the response. Buy your mom an iPhone.
Yeah,
because
hey, we're working on fixing this. There was none of that talk that the usual people give. It's just, well, if you don't like it. And that's been my wife's argument partially is, well, then get an iPhone if that's what you really want. But I think the problem is when they have a 50% market, it then becomes more like the IE, Internet Explorer, or even, the old Ma Bell and the phones that this happened originally with, when one company pretty much owned all the copper going to your house. Well, how do you get competition without running new copper to every single house to get dial-up internet? Because that's when this really became an issue. People didn't care so much when it was about phones, dialing on a regular phone.
That was back in the early 1980s, and that's the last time that the DOJ has actually literally broken up a company. They broke up the Bell system back in the early 80s over just this. So let's kind of telegraph out where we are from here. Do I believe that the DOJ is going to break up Apple? No, I don't. But what I do foresee, depending on how badly Apple has played their cards here, I could see a situation where they are forced to make their messaging app cross-platform. I could see a situation like is being discussed in the EU where they have to allow third-party app stores and other things like that they aren't currently doing in the US. Brian, I have a suspicion that Apple may have really stepped in it here. It really comes down to this, and obviously the DOJ lawsuit has been in the works for years, but I think they really, really screwed themselves with this third-party chat app called Beeper. I have a strong suspicion that the government is going to spend a lot of time focusing on why this application was shut down. Apple will claim terms of service. I don't know if the DOJ is going to buy that.
Yeah, I don't think so. And I think it's going to end up forcing them to put the iMessage app or iMessage app on the Android store. I think that's probably where it's going to end up, because otherwise the alternative is that they fully adopt RCS. They promise to fully align with all
what is
industry
RCS?
standards. It's pretty much the new way that Android phones communicate, so that it can take advantage of more. I'm going to get the actual.
So is it the next iteration of SMS?
Yeah, it's Rich Communication Services is what it stands for.
Okay.
The benefits over SMS is that there's no character limit. You can send high resolution photos and videos. It allows you to send larger files like PDFs and Word documents. It has a verified sender system. You can do message reactions, read receipts, and typing indicators. Has higher text limits, cross-app connectivity. You can do group chats all built in. It pretty much fixes all the limitations of the old SMS type of a system.
Sure.
For more modern. All the carriers now use it. You got AT&T, Sprint, T-Mobile have implemented RCS. Apple is the only one out of the main companies that has not adopted RCS. And so that, I think, is what's really going to hurt them, is they could very, very easily integrate it into their platform. If they just integrate it so that when they're communicating outside of Apple, it uses RCS to send these things, then you wouldn't have all these problems. They're purposely continuing to have problems and forcing anyone who's not in their little ecosystem to the old alternative system. Which, imagine, when all the TVs went to digital, if you had one company saying, no, we're going to force you to stay on analog. But there's no TV stations broadcasted on analog anymore. That doesn't matter. You're staying on analog because that's what we want. Or you can come buy one of our units.
Yeah,
that's,
and that was
pretty much what they're doing.
ATSC 3.0 was that, but that also came from the fact that analog television broadcasts, over-the-air broadcasts, are mandated by the FCC. So there's that government.
Yep.
Now, by the way, I'm not saying,
but I'm worried the government's going to step in and do something similar here. Like, they're opening up for the government saying, well, obviously we need to come in and help regulate how cell phone companies interact with each other. That's my concern, because that means more government overreach. Apple's going to force, not necessarily, in a way, force people's hands. And that's going to cause more regulation, which I hate. Why doesn't Apple just say, all right, we understand, like, we'll do what's right, because that would be the right thing to do, is to make it so that they can adopt the industry standards. But why take it to the point where you're making the government force you? Because once the government has forced you to do it, then they can force other companies to do it. And that's not what I want. I'd rather have Apple just say, hey, if we make a small list of changes, can we drop this? Do that. I don't want the government coming in and making major changes to Apple, because Apple does a pretty good job on a lot of their products. The government coming in and having a say in it's only going to make things worse. In other areas, it may fix one problem, they're going to create three, trying to fix that one problem.
Of course, and that's always the concern. So again, I don't know that, I don't think, and I would not gamble on the fact that Apple is going to be, sued, is going to be forced to be broken up by the federal government or anything of that nature. But what I will say is, I think that they have created some big issues for themselves. It's all been self-inflicted, and it sucks. It sucks that it's at this point that Apple can't just decide to do these things themselves. They feel obligated to operate like this. Now, I will say, Apple's whole thing is their ecosystem. That has been their brand. That has been their business.
They want to keep that wall around it.
They do. They absolutely do. And to their credit, they have been incredibly successful in doing that. They've done a masterful job in creating that. And it's for users that have that ecosystem and have the MacBook and have the Apple Watch and the iPhone and all of the other peripherals and accessories. Brian, it is a great ecosystem. The fact that your AirPods can easily immediately hand off from your MacBook to your phone, unlike a regular pair of Bluetooth headset where I got to disconnect it from this device and turn. That stuff is really cool. but at what cost? And I think that's what the federal government is really going to be diving and digging into in regards to in regards to this lawsuit. Now, Apple, of course, says that they're going to defend themselves to the full extent of the law and blah, 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 blah. Most of the same stuff that we've heard from them in the past. They should be pretty concerned over this.
Yeah, and I think that them trying to do things the way that they've always done, because, I mean, this isn't the beginning. We talked in regards to talking about Apple last week. We talked about how they have required you to have an Apple computer to be able to make any kind of iPhone app.
Sure.
That was something that, that wasn't required, but because they wanted people buying Apple products, they forced you to buy an Apple device to compile your code, which is not in any way necessary. You could build something to compile the code on any type of machine, but they wanted to force you to do it under certified Apple hardware. Couldn't be a virtual machine, couldn't be anything else. Had to be the actual Apple hardware. I think that was kind of the beginning of it that really showed that that's their mentality. And this is a continuation of that mentality that we're seeing now. And it was really unhelpful for developers because, if I don't use Apple products to develop, why should I have to have one computer sitting in a corner if I want to be able to support making an app for an Apple device? Just to compile it and put it out the door. To be able to list it on their store and have to compile it with an Apple computer. Why? Makes zero sense.
I don't disagree with you. It doesn't make any sense, but this has been...
And it's a limitation to being able to put things in their store, which could come back and bite them too.
It is. And I will note this, what's kind of interesting about the whole thing is this is predominantly an issue in the United States more than anywhere else. If you go internationally, WhatsApp is essentially what people use for texting, which is an internet-based chat system, for lack of a better term, because unlike in the United States, foreign telco providers all don't interchange with each other. So there are instances where you literally cannot text certain numbers if you're small
and you might be doing SIM swapping between countries, because that's something that we don't really do here.
No,
but it's very common over there. A lot of these OnePlus phones are big in Europe, and one of the reasons it is because a lot of them have the dual SIM cards, where I can pop in a SIM card while I'm in the UK, and then let's say I know that I'm going to France, I can also put in a SIM card for France, so that when I go over there, I'm automatically able to still make and receive phone calls. Well, but I'm going to have a different phone number. So that creates a problem with my then text communications. So I'm going to want to have a third-party app that's not necessarily tied to my phone number, but that's tied to me, so I can continue seamless communication even when I go from one country to another, because I can't have it to where all of a sudden my text doesn't work anymore because I've gone 100 miles to the east and now I'm in a different country, like in Europe. We don't run into that here because the United States is huge. And, if you go to Mexico, you're meaning to go to Mexico. It's not like you can, going from one place to another, you might cross through another country temporarily.
And it's not even that. It's more the fact of that the U.S. cell providers are all on the same page. It's very hard to do that when you're dealing with dozens of countries all in a relatively small
all using different cell phone
area.
providers.
Yeah, so WhatsApp and Signal are very popular messaging apps overseas. Not as popular here in the United States because there isn't that issue. So that's another thing as well. So we'll follow this. I would not expect anything to happen soon. I'd say soon TM is an accurate phrase to describe the timeline on this. But old Apple, man, they're kind of getting it from all angles here. The EU's up their ass. Now the DOJ and Merrick Garland is hanging out over there too. Not necessarily a good time for old Tim Apple.
Hey, as long as it pushes them in the right direction, I hate anything being forced. But if it makes a better product for everybody and gets them to maybe realize that they're not immune, because that's the thing. I think they figured they were immune.
Well, they have been.
To fail.
Yeah.
They've not gotten any pushback. They've been able to do whatever they want. Okay, show them they're not immune, that they need to actually try to do things well. Not just for themselves, but do things well for their product so it works as best it can. Because wouldn't you consider the product to work better if it was able to communicate with other products correctly?
No, Apple doesn't care about that.
I know, but you would think that that's what their goal is. We want
It's not.
ours to be the one that works perfectly.
No, their
Right
goal
now,
is
they're
for you to buy an
purposely
iPhone.
not making it work perfectly.
Correct. Yes, their goal is for you to
It's-
buy an iPhone.
Yeah, so that you end up buying an iPhone just because of how poorly it communicates with everyone else, which is crazy.
Yes.
I wanted to follow up really
Get an
quickly
iPhone,
before we
Brian.
end the show.
So we could play
yeah, well,
So
hopefully
we could
not.
play 8-ball pool and send things back and forth.
Yeah. Oh, well, then my wife would be happy.
I'm sure she will be. We have been messaging about that throughout the show.
I'm
Your
sure.
your unwillingness.
I want to mention one thing really quick. The FTC has appealed the judge's ruling that would allow Microsoft's Activision Blizzard takeover.
What?
And this was
Brian,
now.
this
Oh
is
wait,
an
I
old
take this back.
story.
This is an old date. How this pop? There's got to be a reason that this popped up. Never mind. Ignore this one. This one, I thought there was an update, but it's not. That's
Brian,
weird.
this is the second
I
week
am
in a row.
getting some old news.
You are
I'm
falling
gonna
into
delete
the
this like it never happened.
You are falling. Yeah, well, it is now. The lower third says it. I mean, it says the topic is Microsoft.
Well, I could go on with another Microsoft topic here real seamlessly, but
This, Brian, you are falling into the trap of old news.
old news.
It's a very real risk. Have you been browsing Have you been spending a lot of time on Facebook? Because that's where this is the most prominent. Oh
I know.
my
Well,
God! Can you believe this?
this is
It's like a story
Google
from
News.
2016.
Okay, so the FTC. Let me get this back. On February 20th of 2024, the FTC has appealed. Why that one shows that I don't know what happened with that article. The Federal Trade Commission authorized an administrative complaint against the proposed merger between Microsoft Corp and Activision Blizzard. This is new, I promise. This is a pending thing. How that one, I don't know why in the world it shows July 23rd. That is so weird. But it did happen here recently. Maybe they didn't update and didn't mark it. But yeah, they did here on February 20th, 2024. They've updated. They still have that going as a complaint. So kind of odd. But complaint counsel's motion to leave to file a reply in support of the, so that was on February 20th. So they are still pushing this. The evidentiary hearing will commence in 21 days. So it's not been dropped yet. That's the one thing I wanted to mention is they're still pushing to try to stop the merger of Activision Blizzard at the FTC, and they're still putting paperwork through. It's insane. I'll put this one that's actually a current one so that people will understand that I'm not making things up.
No, nobody would ever have assumed that. Speaking of Microsoft, this is a pretty big story, and it kind of piggybacks onto what we were just talking about. They are not planning on creating an Xbox cloud gaming app for iOS because, quote, there's no room for monetization. Because there's not enough money to be made with Apple's ridiculous policy of and only being able to use
as a third party.
Which I will say that Xbox, aka Microsoft, has a very suitable and capable payment system as they have been running, and you've been able to purchase games on Xbox Live for what? 17 plus years or something like that, some ridiculous amount of time. They've got that down, but for them, they say there's just no point because the monetization.
It's making a worse environment. Imagine how much they're giving up, because imagine how many people would go buy an iPad for their kids to be able to use that, for them to use it as their cloud streaming device for Xbox. You hook up a controller, an Xbox controller, to an iPad app, and the thing will work like a mobile Xbox. It'll work really, really well. This should be what they're trying to adopt. This is what you would think Apple would be like, yes, let's do what we need to get Microsoft to be able to put their app on here, because more people will buy Apple devices because of their screens, because of how thin they are and lightweight, because of they're easy for kids to use. And then you can hand it to the kid, lock it down, and say, here you go. Play your games. Now you're forcing people to go and buy Android tablets to be able to take advantage of the Xbox streaming, which works pretty well. I've been using it exclusively for streaming Palworld. I don't stream or play on my Xbox here to play Palworld. My wife hosts the game on her Xbox, on one of the Xboxes under her account, and then I play with the streaming service connecting to her. Don't even buy, because it works just as well, and there's no point.
Yeah.
And this, I think, is going to be a big future for Microsoft, is getting away from hardware consoles, going to the streaming device, and you're not going to be able to do it at all on an Apple device because of how stubborn they are.
Well, and so here's the thing. How does this, let's get rid of the DOJ antitrust suit. Let's just forget that we talked about that for the last 25 minutes. How does this actually change? How does Apple actually start feeling the pressure? Big companies, like arguably their arch rival in Microsoft, saying, yeah, we're not going to release our cloud service on your very successful line of phones and tablets. I mean, this is more large companies need to be willing to do this. We've seen Epic do it now. Microsoft is looking to do it with specifically here with their cloud gaming software. You get enough of these big companies, Brian, that start operating this and start handling it in this manner, and I assume the internal pressure would eventually be enough to force Apple to coin deals with these companies. But until
they did a
there's
deal with
more
Spotify,
pressure,
wasn't it Spotify or Pandora? I don't remember which one it was, but they were
have
doing a special deal with them.
Do they?
They had it to where they weren't having to pay the normal fees for their subscriptions. So if they're willing to do it for them, like Microsoft's a pretty big company. They might be the ones that you would want to work out a deal with if it keeps people playing their system. Because a month ago, there was an article put out by 9to5 Google, says Xbox confirms over 10% of in-game hours come from cloud gaming, which you would think, oh, that's not. But all Xbox gamers, you're getting to where over 10% now are using the streaming service.
Yeah,
that's a pretty big number of hours, and so it's becoming more normalized. And I think it's going to continue going that direction to where 50% plus are going to be using the streaming service once it becomes something that people realize is seamless enough. It works really well. Gives you the full Xbox experience, and you can, once they start building it directly into TVs, to be able to use the Xbox app, which some of them already have. That will become the go-to. People will make sure that they have the ability to use the streaming service. And then when they're getting their kids a device, they're going to make sure it's one that's compatible with that app. That's why I switched from Verizon to T-Mobile back in the day, is because I wanted to be able to use a OnePlus. And Verizon refused to let it use it because of their infrastructure didn't use used a different set of frequencies.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so I turned around and said, all right, dumped all of my devices that's how you answer it. T-Mobile is now bigger than Verizon. If you would have said 5-10 years ago that was going to be the case, not a chance. Everyone's like, Verizon forever. Verizon's the biggest. Verizon's the best cell phone company there is. Not anymore, because enough people turned
myself.
Well, yeah, but that's because iPhones love AT&T.
They did. Originally, it was the only place you
back
could get
in the day.
iPhone.
Yeah, they forced people there. But T-Mobile's taken over because they provided better service, and everybody eventually, for most part, started moving over there. And now you've got a higher percentage of people there. Same thing can happen to iPhone.
We need to get Ryan Reynolds. What's his cell phone company? Mint Mobile.
Isn't that
his? Yeah, we need to get him on the show. Maybe we need to advertise. Maybe he needs to do some advertising on Old Infection.
Yeah, in fact, start pushing a third-party alternative.
Yeah, well, we can promote that
Verizon
stupid phone that's the size of a Bible as as an
Libra,
alternative.
whatever.
The stupid open source phone. We can promote that, and then Mint Mobile, great.
Well, and this is something I think that we're going to start seeing that transition from iPhone in the same way that you saw, because Verizon really has hurt themselves in the long run by doing practices the way they did. And, and they went on to a proprietary network, and they said, well, that's why we're so good. Well, they made themselves not compatible with anyone else, just like Apple has done with their messaging service. If you want to see a perfect parallel, what Verizon did when it came to using their own private frequency that made it to where only phones that were made for their service could work, and no one could take a phone anywhere else. That's what Apple's doing with their messaging service. it ended up making it so that Verizon was no longer the top cell phone company, and I think it's going to do to where we have Apple no longer being the top cell phone provider.
Put it in the book.
I'll do that.
All right. Brian, where can folks find you on the old interwebs?
All right. If you want to find me, you can find me at Boise Computer on X or at Brian Aldridge on Gab, Get Us to the Social, wherever else. If you want to find me on my blog at biteoftech.com, of course, if you go to our website, infectionpodcast.com, just join the upper right-hand side, join our server, Discord server. It's a great place if you want to get a hold of Nick or I. Maybe you want to talk some politics. Maybe you want to play some ARC. We've still got our 11 ARC servers running, people playing on that all day. More than welcome to check it out. If you're going to be watching the show, you can do that through Twitch or YouTube. We upload the show after the fact to Rumble, and we do the same thing with our podcast form. If you want to watch or listen to the show after the fact, Rumble, or any of the different providers, the lower right-hand side, we've got a lot of different ways to do that. And if you are watching one of those or listening to one of those, that means we have the particular episode show notes up and ready to go with a video and audio player built into that page, and then links for all the different topics we discussed. For today's topic, we've got a number of articles that have supporting information, have contrasting views of the topic that we didn't cover in depth. That's a perfect place if you want to go learn a little bit more of both sides of the issue. I make sure I include links to various things for that. So if you want to support us, you can do that through the menu option up top, or you can go to infectionpodcast.com/support.
I want to thank our friend Donnie PC Games for hitting us up with the 23-month subscription earlier in the show. Donnie, greatly appreciated. Thanks for sticking around with us as long as you have. It is greatly appreciated. All right, Brian. Well, I guess we'll continue to sail the seven seas in regards to GamerGate 2.0, and we'll be tracking it right here on the front lines. All right, Brian, we'll catch up with you next week. See you.
See you later.
Alrighty, folks. Well, if you want to check me out, you can check out my podcast, The Day Job. It's called Wilmington's Morning News. It's available in your favorite podcast apps, or you can visit my website, nickcraig.com. Also, follow me on X at Nicholas M. Craig. If you missed any portion of today's illustrious program, head on over to our website. It's infectionpodcast.com. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Have a great week. We will see you next time.